everybody! Welcome to my channel. My name is Katie Liu and I will be backpacking Asia from the end of May to the end of August, and I hope to bring you guys along for the journey. In this video, I'm going to have a brief introduction and talk about my travel style, and then I will go into some frequently asked questions and some travel advice for anybody who is planning a trip on their own. My trip will be a combination of staying with people I know and staying with relatives, and also staying by myself and traveling by myself. After I graduated high school, so the summer of 2022, I solo backpacked Europe, which I didn't film at all, but it was the best time of my life, and that's why I'm so excited to solo travel again. I think I have a unique travel style compared to most solo backpackers because I am more introverted and I do prefer to do most things by myself. This is a kind of a different vlog style for people who are more introverted like myself, so if that's something that appeals to you, then this channel can be for you. The first question I get all the time is, where am I going and how did I decide where I wanted to go? And the answer to that is that I'm going to 10 different countries, which I selected on a variety of factors, including how much each cost, as well as how safe it was for a solo female traveler, as well as countries which spoke Mandarin. So about a year and a half ago, I started to study Mandarin, and so I really wanted to go to places which they spoke a lot of Mandarin in. Another frequent question is, how did I book everything for my trip? So a lot of travelers do like to go, let's say they like to meet in Thailand, and then they like to figure out as they go where they want to go, but that's not my travel style. I booked all of my flights on Expedia, and I booked all of my hostels using Hostelworld. This video is not sponsored, but I highly recommend both of these apps because they are easy to use, they are reliable, and I've never had an issue with either of them. Another common thing that people wonder is which countries I needed a visa to go into. So I'm going to 10 different places, but only 4 of them needed visas. This included China, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. Only China, I had to go through a detailed process where I brought my passport in and they did different checks, but the other 3, I was able to do all of them online just using a website. So I'm going to link all of the websites I used, which are reliable, and I had no issues using them. So I'll put them into the description of this video so you can check them out if you also need to go to those countries. So another thing you may be wondering is which vaccinations you need to get, and in order to figure this out, I went to a travel clinic, which they gave me a pretty detailed description of each of the vaccines and which ones I would need. So as a kid growing up in BC, I did get all the vaccinations in school, like up until grade 9. So I was vaccinated as a kid, but in order to go to Asia, I had to get some additional ones. So the first one was hepatitis A, the second one was typhoid, and the third one was a meningitis booster because the last time I got a booster was in grade 9, so it had already been 5 years later. I do recommend that if you do not have these vaccines, you definitely need to get those ones, but I would recommend going to a travel clinic in order to see if there's other specific ones which you may be missing. And one more thing about the vaccinations is there was an option for me to get the Japanese encephalitis shots, which cost roughly around $500 total for me to get them. So I decided against it, and instead I'm going to take mosquito precautions. So the doctor suggested that you use bug spray, which has at least 20% DEET. But this DEET can kill plastics, so you are supposed to not spray it on any plastics. You can spray your clothes and you can spray your skin, but if you're wearing sunscreen, make sure you let the sunscreen dry for at least 15 minutes before spraying DEET on it. Now I will be talking about some essential travel tips, which I learned both in Europe, and I'm going to bring them with me in Asia, as well as other tips which I've just accumulated along the way of being a solo traveler. So the very first one is to bring comfortable clothing. When I went to Europe, I thought, okay, like I want to dress like European people, or I want to get these specific clothes that I never would wear here, but I was like, I will wear them when I'm in Europe. And it turns out that when I was in Europe, I never wanted to wear those clothes. I always wanted to wear the clothing that I thought was comfortable and that I was comfortable in. My second piece of advice is to look at the flight times and make sure you do not book too early of a flight. So I watched a lot of travel YouTube before I left to Europe, and nobody had mentioned this, so I never really considered this. And when I was booking my flights, I just chose the cheapest one. If it was at 7 a.m., I thought to myself, I can wake up that early, and I just booked those flights. But it turned out that actually it was very difficult to get to the airport by 4 or 5 a.m. if your flight is at 7 a.m. And if my hostel was like an hour away, then it was impossible because transit didn't go that late and it was unsafe to be out that night. So what ended up happening a lot in Europe was that I decided to go overnight. So I would leave at like 10 p.m. the night before, and I'd just stay at the airport until 4 or 5. Even if it costs an extra $100, take a flight that is at least at 12 or later so you don't have an issue in the morning and you don't have to stay overnight at the airport. So my last piece of advice, which I definitely thought was useful in Europe, was to bring a lot of tissue paper. I found that I was taking the Eurail train a lot, and the train was often out of toilet paper or they didn't have any tissues. The most important thing that I did bring and that I would definitely recommend bringing on your trip. So the final part of this video is I'm going to talk about some key life lessons which I learned while traveling Europe and that I'm going to be bringing into Asia. And these are more just mindsets that I have which help me stay positive and help me have a great time while traveling. So the first one is that people want you there. So when I was traveling in Europe, my mom had a lot of friends and people that I could possibly stay with. And I felt so hesitant because I felt so bad. I didn't want to burden anybody and I didn't want to be a nuisance for them and their regular life. But every single time that I did actually meet up with people that I knew there, it was the most amazing experience and it was so incredibly worth it. And I realized that as much as I was getting a lot out of staying with them, they were also getting a lot out of having somebody with a different perspective and somebody who grew up in a different country staying with them. You do have the opportunity to meet up with somebody that you know. It is 100% worth it, and being able to see the culture and being able to actually experience the locals' lives is the best part of traveling. So I'd 100% push yourself out of your comfort zone. Even as an introvert myself, push yourself out of your comfort zone and definitely go for it. So my second mindset, which I like to travel with, don't get caught up in the coulda, woulda, shouldas while you're traveling, because a lot of people get boggled down by, oh, I should have taken this, I should have seen this, I could have done that, it would have been so amazing. And as much as you can reflect and focus on the bad things that did happen in your trip, I would highly suggest not to get too upset over those things, because in life, there's so many of those things. You can always have something better. You could have always done something a different way. And if you think about all of those things, it's never going to make your life happier. It's so much better to have the mindset of, next time I can learn something from this, but everything happened the way it was supposed to happen, and it brought me to where I am today. The third key mindset, it's actually the story of the Chinese farmer. He's saying it wrong, but this is like the version that I know. There's an old man and he had a horse, and one day the horse ran away. And then the whole town said, "You're so unlucky." And he says, "You never know." And then the next day the horse comes back and brings a whole bunch of horses back. And the whole town says, "Wow, you're so lucky." And he says, "You never know." And then the next day his son goes out on the horse and breaks his leg. And the whole town says, "Wow, you're so unlucky." He says, "You never know." And then the final day, a military man comes to take people to go to the war, but since his son has a broken leg, he doesn't have to go. And the whole town says, "Wow, you're so lucky." And he says, "You never know." So the point of that story is that you never know in life if something's a good thing or a bad thing. And if you think about every single bad thing which ever happened to you, and if you had the option to actually erase that from happening, rarely would you choose to erase that from happening. I know there are definitely some circumstances which you would, but if I think about all of the quote-unquote bad things which happened in my life, I would not want to erase a single one of them because they all taught me an important lesson and they all got me to where I am here. English, it's so long, like the story is so long, but in Chinese it's actually really short. Just Sai Wan Shima Yanzhi Fei Fu. And just those 8 words means the entire story that I had previously said. This means old man loses horse, how do you know it's a bad thing? And so that's the kind of the mindset I like to bring of how do you know it's a bad thing? So sometimes when you're traveling, things go wrong. Actually, all the time when you're traveling, things go wrong. But how do you know it's a bad thing? Just always trying to see the light in the situation and always trying to see the best in people. So thank you so much for everybody who listened to this video. The next video I will make will be about packing and what's actually in my bag for Asia. And then after that, the videos will just be about traveling. So if you stuck around, I appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you can and you haven't already. And I hope you guys have an amazing day.